All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to be taking a look into the core ideas from a book you've probably heard of because it's everywhere. Atomic Habits by James Clear. It is all about a simple but super proven way to build good habits and, maybe more importantly, break the bad ones. Look, we've all been there, right? You set a goal, maybe it's a New Year's resolution, and you're just full of motivation. But then, a few weeks later, that fire kind of fizzles out, and you're right back where you started. So why? Why do our best intentions so often fail before they even get off the ground? Let's get into it. So here's the central idea of the entire book. The secret to massive, life-altering change isn't some huge, heroic effort. Nope. It's all about getting just 1% better every single day. Just a tiny, almost unnoticeable improvement. Okay, let's really dive into this core concept because understanding it can literally change everything. It's all about the surprising and powerful math behind these small habits. It's so easy to dismiss a small change, right? Meditating for 1 minute, reading just one page, it feels insignificant. But think of it like compound interest for your life. The effects of your habits multiply. If you get just 1% better each day for a year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. But, and this is important, be careful, because the math works both ways. Small daily stresses, negative thoughts, they also compound and can lead you in the exact wrong direction. And this isn't just a nice theory. It's been proven in the real world. Just take a look at British cycling. For over a century, they were the definition of mediocre. Their performance was so bad that one top bike manufacturer actually refused to sell them bikes because they were afraid it would damage their reputation. Ouch. But then, in 2003, everything changed when they hired a new performance director, Dave Brailsford. His strategy was what he called the aggregation of marginal gains. He believed that if they could improve every single tiny aspect of cycling by just 1%, those gains would all add up to something huge. And they focused on everything. They hired a surgeon to teach proper hand washing to avoid colds. They even painted the inside of the team truck white just to spot tiny bits of dust that could affect bike performance. And the results? They were absolutely staggering. That British cycling story perfectly illustrates the book's next core principle. Forget about goals. Think about it. Their goal was always to win the Tour de France. The difference wasn't the goal. It was their system of tiny, daily improvements. After all, winners and losers often have the exact same goals. It's the system that makes all the difference. We often get so discouraged because we expect our progress to be this nice, neat, linear thing. We put in the work and we expect to see immediate, steady results. But the reality of building good habits and making any meaningful changes, it's a lot messier. James Clear has a name for this, critical period. He calls it the valley of disappointment. It's that gap where your 1% improvements are happening, but the big results haven't broken through to the surface yet. This is the danger zone. This is where most people quit, because the most meaningful results of compounding are always delayed. You just have to persist long enough to break through that plateau of latent potential. So here's the crucial takeaway from all this. Focus on building a good system of daily habits, not on the outcome. Your goals don't determine your success. Your systems do. You just have to commit to the process and trust that the results will follow. And this leads us to what might be the most powerful idea in the whole book, identity-based habits. See, the goal isn't just to read a book, it's to become a reader. The goal isn't to run a marathon, it's to become a runner. When your behavior and your identity are aligned, you're not forcing change anymore. You're just acting like the type of person you already believed you are. So how do we actually build these systems and start shaping our identity? Well, first, we need to understand the mechanics behind it all. Let's break down the simple 4-step pattern that every single one of your habits follows. This is the habit loop. It's a neurological feedback loop that your brain runs through every single time you perform a habit. And it's happening constantly, a lot of the time on complete autopilot, without you even realizing it. Cue, craving, response, reward. Let's break that down. First up, there's the cue. This is the trigger, that little bit of information that tells your brain, hey, a reward is coming. It could be a time of day, a location, or, in this case, the buzz of your phone in your pocket. That phone buzz, the cue, it leads to a craving. Now, this is the motivational force. But here's the key. You don't actually crave the buzzing sound itself. You crave the change in state it predicts. That little hit of curiosity, connection, or just distraction. So that craving is what drives the response, which is the actual habit you perform. This could be a thought or an action. And here, the response is pretty obvious. You reach for your phone and you check the message. And finally, you get the reward. The reward is the end goal of every single habit. It satisfies your craving. In this case, your curiosity is satisfied. And, crucially, it teaches your brain which actions are worth remembering and repeating in the future. And boom, the loop is complete. All right, now that we understand the loop, we can start to mess with it. And this brings us to the 4 laws of behavior change. The first law targets the very first step of that loop, the cue. You know, one of the most powerful drivers of our habits is our environment. We like to think we're in total control, but our surroundings shape our actions in all these subtle ways. Check out this diagram. A hospital cafeteria increased its water sales by over 25% just by adding more water bottles to the drink stations. They didn't have to persuade anyone. They just made the cue, the water bottle, more obvious. So how do you actually apply this stuff? Well, first, you've got to redesign your environment. Want to eat healthier? Put that bowl of apples right on the counter, not hidden in some drawer. Want to practice guitar? Don't leave it in the case in the closet. Make it the centerpiece of your living room. Then there's this really cool technique called habit stacking. It's where you link a new habit to one you already do. Like, after I pour my morning coffee, I'll meditate for just 1 minute. The coffee you're already making becomes the cue. Brilliant, right? Okay, so we've made the cue totally obvious. But what happens next? Well, that cue needs to trigger a craving, right? And that brings us perfectly to the second law, make it attractive. Now, this one gets right to the heart of what motivates us. Our brains are basically running on this dopamine-fueled feedback loop. And what's really fascinating is that it's the anticipation of a reward that gets us going, sometimes even more than the reward itself. So the more attractive we can make something seem, the stronger that craving is going to be. And just think about it for a second. Our habits today, they're really just modern solutions to these super ancient desires. We are hardwired to connect with other people, so we browse Facebook. We crave social approval and status, so we post on Instagram. These companies aren't inventing new motivations out of thin air. They're just brilliantly latching onto the fundamental human drives that have been with us for thousands of years. One of the simplest but most powerful ways to do this is to just reframe your habits. As you can see here, just shifting your mindset from I have to I get to changes everything. I have to go for a run becomes I get to build endurance. You're transforming these things from burdens into opportunities, which makes them instantly way more attractive. We're also deeply social creatures, right? And we can use that to our advantage. One of the best ways to make a habit attractive is to join a culture where that habit is the normal thing to do. We naturally imitate the habits of 3 groups: the people who are close to us, the many in our society, and the powerful people we admire. So if you want to adopt a new habit, go surround yourself with people who are already living it. Okay, so the cue is obvious. The craving is there. But if the thing itself is just too hard, we're still probably not going to do it. And that leads us straight into the third law, make it easy. And look, this isn't about being lazy, it's about being smart. Our brains are fundamentally wired to conserve energy. They follow the path of least resistance. So what does that mean? It means the less friction, the less effort there is between you and a good habit, the more likely you are to actually follow through, especially on those days where you're just not feeling it. The key thing to remember here is that repetition is way more important than perfection. There was this famous experiment that proves this perfectly. A photography professor splits his class into 2 groups. The quantity group, they were graded on how many photos they took. 100 photos gets you an A. The quality group just had to turn in 1 single perfect photo. So who do you think took the best pictures in the end? It was the quantity group every single time. Why? Because they were busy doing, they were practicing, making mistakes and learning. It's the action, not just the planning, that actually builds the skill. And hey, this law works in reverse too. If you want to break a bad habit, you've got to make it difficult. The novelist Victor Hugo has a legendary story about this. He was facing a huge deadline, so he had his assistant lock away all of his clothes. Literally. By making it pretty much impossible to go outside, he made procrastinating incredibly hard. He added a ton of friction to his bad habit. So the big takeaway here is to reduce that friction. Lay out your workout clothes the night before. That's a classic. But the real game changer here is what Clear calls the 2-minute rule. The idea is that when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. So read before bed becomes read 1 page. Do yoga becomes just roll out my yoga mat. The whole point is to make it so unbelievably easy that you can't possibly say no. Okay, so you did it. You made it obvious, attractive, and easy. But how do you make sure you actually come back and do it again tomorrow and the day after that? Well, that's where the fourth and final law comes in. Make it satisfying. Now, here's the fundamental challenge we're all up against. Our brains are wired for immediate gratification. The big problem is that the reward for a bad habit, like eating a cookie, is immediate. But the reward for a good habit, like going to the gym, is often way off in the future. So to make a good habit stick, we have to find some way to give ourselves an immediate win. And there's this great story about how to do this. A young stockbroker had this super daunting task of making 120 sales calls every single day. To make it satisfying, he came up with this simple but totally brilliant strategy to give himself that immediate gratification he needed to just stay on track. His strategy couldn't have been simpler. He just put 2 jars on his desk. One started the day filled with 120 paper clips. The other one was empty. And after every single call, he'd move one paperclip over to the other jar. That small, physical action was everything. It created this visual proof of his progress, and it gave him this tiny hit of satisfaction that made the whole grueling process feel rewarding. And it's the exact same psychology behind Jerry Seinfeld's famous productivity trick. You've probably heard of this one. To get better at comedy, he made a simple commitment. Write jokes every single day, no exceptions. And to track it, he'd put a big red X on a calendar for every day he did it. After a few days, you get a chain. And then your only job is to not break the chain. That visual chain becomes the reward. It's so simple, but so powerful. Okay, so visual progress helps a ton. But just showing up is only half the battle, right? If you want to maintain habits for the long haul, we're talking years, you have to make sure you're playing the right game in the first place. It's all about aligning your habits with who you naturally are. Okay, this is one of my favorite examples from the book. It's just wild. You've got Michael Phelps, the swimmer, and Hicham El Guerrouj, the distance runner. Phelps is a full 7 inches taller than El Guerrouj, but they wear the same inseam on their pants. How is that even possible? Well, it's because Phelps is all torso and has relatively short legs. He's basically built like a human boat, perfect for swimming. El Guerrouj is the exact opposite. Long legs, short torso, a body literally designed for running long distances. The point is, they became legends because they picked a game where their natural biology gave them a huge advantage. So, how do we find our unique advantage? We might not be built like an Olympian, but the principle is the same. The book gives us this incredible question to ask ourselves. What feels like fun to me, but work to others? Think about that for a second. The stuff that you actually enjoy doing while everyone else is groaning and complaining, that is your sweet spot. That's the work you were built to do. All right, so you found your sweet spot. Now, how do you stay engaged for the long run? That's where something called the Goldilocks rule comes in. It's exactly what it sounds like. We humans are at our most motivated when a task is not too hard and not too easy, but just right. It has to be, as the book says, a just manageable difficulty. Too easy, you get bored. Too hard, you give up. The secret to staying motivated is to constantly live right there, on the edge of your current abilities. And look no further than comedian Steve Martin for a perfect example of this. He didn't just explode onto the scene as a superstar. No way. The man spent 15 years grinding it out, constantly living in that Goldilocks zone. He started with like 5-minute routines in totally empty clubs. Then he pushed it to a 20-minute weekly show. Then he got on TV. Then finally he was selling out arenas. Each step was just a little bit harder than the last. It was always a manageable challenge. And this leads to one of the most important takeaways in the entire book. The greatest threat to your success isn't failure, it's boredom. Seriously, once you get good at something, the thrill wears off. It becomes routine. And that's the moment of truth. The difference between an amateur and a pro is that the pro shows up even when they're bored out of their mind. They stick to the schedule. They learn to fall in love with the process itself, not just the excitement of getting better. So, okay, you've built your system, you're playing to your strengths, you've even learned to embrace the boredom. You're done, right? You've made it. Well, not quite. There's one last crucial piece to this puzzle, and that's making sure your habits grow and change along with you. This quote from Lao Tzu just says it all, doesn't it? The hard and stiff will be broken. The soft and supple will prevail. Look, systems are amazing. They're essential. But if you hold on to them too tightly, if they become too rigid, they'll actually hold you back. True mastery isn't just about discipline. It's also about knowing when to be flexible, when to adjust your sails. So how do you actually do that? How do you stay flexible?
Well, James Clear gives us a really practical system for it. Basically, it's like a performance review for your own life. Every year, you do an annual review. What went well, what didn't, what did I learn? And then you also do an integrity report. This one is about checking in with your core values. Are you living the life you claim to value? These little check-ins are what stop you from just mindlessly going through the motions with habits that don't even fit who you are anymore.
And that's why this is so important. A lack of self-awareness is poison. It really is. And this process of reflection and review, that's the antidote. Remember, your habits are supposed to serve your identity, but you're not the same person you were a year ago. As you grow, your habits need to grow with you. Otherwise, you just get stuck.
Okay, let's pull this all together. Everything we've talked about in this whole series, it boils down to this system, right here. The entire philosophy of atomic habits is built from the inside out. You don't start with the outcomes, with what you want to get. No, you start with identity, with who you want to be. That identity then dictates your process, the habits and systems you put in place. And it's that process that, eventually, delivers the outcomes you were looking for.
And that, right there, is the heart of it all. This is the main idea of the entire book. Lasting change is just the compound interest of all those tiny, daily actions you take, as long as they're aligned with the person you want to become. Success isn't some finish line you cross. It's a system you live by, day in and day out. So, I'm going to leave you with what I think is the most powerful question in this whole book. Forget about the big goals for a second. Forget about the 5-year plan. Just ask yourself this one simple question. What's one small thing I can do today that will cast a vote for the person I want to become? A look into Atomic Habits gives you the insight, but the full book gives you the breakthrough. If you're ready to master your own mind, the link is in the description. Share this with someone who is also building their best self. Then like and subscribe to keep gaining clarity. Choose to grow.